Okay, we're going to take notes a little bit different today since I will be out again tomorrow. So I want you to take notes as we follow along in this video. And hopefully this is a little bit better than just reading what I have, so we can kind of talk you through it. Okay, so the question asks, how does the opening scene of chapter 4 contrast to the opening scene of chapter 3? Well, I know that contrast means how does it differ? How is it different? So I'm going to think about what we know about chapter 3. In chapter 3, we learn that Giselle writes a story. It was fictional, but she writes a fictional story about a real thing. And so there's a real thing where people cannot feel pain. So she writes about a story about a girl who cannot feel pain. That was the opening scene of that story. Chapter 4 begins with an opposite contrast to chapter 3. In chapter 4, we actually find out that Giselle is in quite a bit of pain. So that is in contrast to chapter 3. I'm going to use my vocabulary. In contrast to chapter 3, when we learn about a girl who has a congenital defect that allows her to not feel pain. And we kind of talked about in chapter 3 how that can still relate to Giselle, though, about feeling numb and feeling like that disconnect from the world. So maybe in chapter 4, we might have some more feeling. I don't know. It's kind of what our author is maybe alluding to. But the important thing I think to note is that we have a complete difference. And I want to read a part of that chapter for you. Chapter 4 starts, pain, so much pain, flesh, exploding pain, pens and needles pain, fiery, hot pain, cold pain, hammer pounding on your head pain, hammer pounding on your bones pain, star, blinding pain, pain that makes it impossible to even scream. So we talk about pain in all parts of her body, hot and cold, pounding on your head, on your bones. The star blinding pain brought me back to the scene where she first heard about this may not be an accident, and the star explodes as they retry to resuscitate her. Pain making it impossible to scream makes me think of feeling trapped. And so these are all feelings that we've had in previous chapters, and they're kind of referencing back to. The most painful thing about this kind of pain is that you never know how long it's going to last. Somehow, when you're right in the middle of it, your whole body feels locked in as though the pain is going to last forever. So sometimes when you're in a painful moment, whether it be physical or emotional, it feels like you're going to feel that way forever. I know grief can feel that way. You just imagine, how am I ever going to feel different? How will I ever feel normal again? And that's an emotional type of pain. It's so immense that you just can't see. You can't see at the surface. Same thing with physical pain. Luckily, I've never been in that kind of pain where I feel like I can't live that, survive that. But that does exist, and that's what she's feeling now. And I think it's important to always think about the characters here, our narrator, Giselle, as having sort of those types of pain. So question 1, we're saying how it was contrast, the difference in having no pain to immense pain. Question 2, what literary device is being used in the chapter to describe the feelings of the narrator? So the literary device, what I'm looking for, a word like metaphor, simile, imagery, personification. What do we think? What literary device? Well, I know that sensory details is an example of imagery, and she is describing in great detail the feelings of this pain. What do you think is the most powerful line on the page? I reference back to that page 37. So I want you to tell me, maybe it's one of those sensory details. Maybe you think it's flesh exploding pain. Maybe you think it's pain that makes it impossible to even scream because that alludes to being trapped. Maybe you think it's the most painful thing about this kind of pain is that you never how long it's going to last, where it feels like it's never going to end. Or maybe you think it's a line of your whole body feeling locked in, although it's going to last forever. So that is going to be you, and what you think is going to be written here for answer 3. Question 4, why does Giselle want to go back under? Remember, under is sort of that Alice in Wonderland upside down world where things are, she's beneath the surface. It's kind of like the unreality. And what does the under represent, which I just kind of told you, that it represents that other world, the alien world, for Giselle. And she kind of goes there when she has a hard time physically and emotionally dealing with the pain. So why does she want to go back under there? So if you look at the next page, let's see. I want to be way under in a dark but pain-free world, in a class full of beautiful paintings and beautiful boys. I want to be at all 16 of the birthday parties that Isabel and I have had, at all the wonderful vacations we've had with our parents, at all the first days of school, at all the church services, even the ones we found so boring, at the swimming and tennis classes, at all the art and creative writing camps. I want to be home with Mom and Dad and Isabel and Dessalines. I want to be back in my life, even when it was starting to fall apart. So that's a good passage I want you to think about when you're answering this question of why she would want to go back under. What does that under do for her? Thinking of that paragraph. She says, I want to go back to all the birthday parties, of all the vacations, of all the memories. And even though our family was going to be different, I even go back to that moment. So think of that while you answer question 4. Question 5, Giselle describes Pastor Ben through direct characterization. So we know that direct characterization tells us exactly what or who somebody is. They describe often physical traits, or they just tell you. So indirect would be through showing. This is telling. So we have some direct characterization about the pastor later on down that page, on page 38. We talk about, let's see, the only thing Pastor Ben likes more than his cotton guayabera shirts is to pull on the long white beard and talking about Lazarus. Pastor Ben's eggplant-colored face with the shock of silver hair that tops it and matching silver beard that frames it swings in out of my view. So how is she describing him directly? You can answer that there. And what is the importance of the illusion for Lazarus? Remember, an illusion is a literary device where we refer to a well-known popular person, thing, or idea, and Lazarus is the illusion. So she had mentioned that she caught people speaking of Lazarus, and Lazarus is something that her pastor had talked about. And on page 39, she says, I hear him say something about 24 hours, then Lazarus. Has it been 24 hours already? Is he calling me Lazarus? After the man who came back from the dead? So Lazarus is a man who came back from the dead. So that's the illusion. Wasn't there ever a girl who came back from the dead? A set of twins? An entire family? So she is referring to herself as being like Lazarus. Is she brought back to the dead? Was her sister brought back to the dead? Where's her family? So that's going to help you answer question 6. Number 7, describe the Pentimento paintings. On page 39, reread the quote. I like that. Page 39. Reread the quote beginning with beyond the image and ending with something had been there at first and then had been erased. So we're trying to describe what these paintings are. So you're going to give me an explanation of what they are. So I'm going to go to page 39 and find the paragraph that starts with beyond the image. It's near the bottom, the last couple paragraphs. Beyond the image on the surface of the painting, there was also an old image you could see. It was as if the artist wanted you to know that nothing came out perfect. Something had been there first, then had been erased, though not all the way. In Italian, pentimento means repentance. Mr. Rice had told us, in painting over his or her work, the artist was not just repainting, but also repenting. I went a little too far. That was supposed to end with something had been there first and had been erased, though not all the way. So what are those paintings? So it's a painting that, beyond the image of the surface, there was an old image you could see. So the artist would erase everything, but leave a little bit behind. He wanted you to know that not everything was perfect and that, something had been there and erased, but they didn't quite erase it all the way. So you're going to explain that and then explain the quote. In painting over his or her old work, the artist was not just repainting, but also repenting. So I thought that was interesting. You know, the prefix re means like to do something over again. So he's repainting as well as repenting, maybe, like talking about regret, of things that were undone, but not all done all the way because they weren't completely erased. So I thought that was very interesting. So I would like you to explain what you think that painting, why would that be important to note? About repainting our reality, but not forgetting everything, leaving something still there and not erasing it completely. And then we're on number 9. What do you think these hidden pictures could mean in comparison to what is happening to Giselle? So kind of what I just said, there's like a hidden picture there. So there's who she was before the accident. Sometimes the outer painting, who she's going to become now, is erased and a new picture is revealed. So maybe who she is now is going to be revealed through what she used to be. And sometimes it's pictures that merge together and create a whole new painting. So maybe, what does that mean? I keep seeing the word of merged, like the parents tried not to merge their identities, but these paintings are merged together. Who she was and who she is it going to be a whole brand new person or maybe some kind of merge of who she was and who she is now? So think of that. What do you think those hidden pictures and could mean, and why would that be worth the author writing about? So remember, in our writing, everything is intentional, and we're just kind of like little detectives and trying to figure out the mystery. Question 10, what is revealed about Giselle's injuries on page 41 and on Isabel's? So on page 41, let's see. It says, in the hospital room, I try to take in as much as I can. This is the beginning of the page. Before I slip under, I hear someone say that I was moved out of the pediatric intensive care unit because I have a concussion, but no life-threatening internal injuries nor broken bones. So remember, before she was in the PICU, which is intensive, where people need to be looked at very closely. Then all these other injuries, the fractures, the contusions, the lacerations, the tube, the missing teeth must have been Isabel's and hers alone. So she's like, okay, I'm not in the intensive unit anymore. Now I'm in a different place. And all those things that I thought are not mine, they must be Isabel's. So that's what you're going to write there. What do you think? What do we learn about whose injuries were whom? But are we trusting our narrator? Is that really what's going on? I don't know. But so we're going to be writing about Giselle's. What do we learn? She's no longer in the PICU. She's in some kind of step-down unit, they call it. It's not really referenced in there, but I'll let you know. We're Remember to pick your watch very carefully, so she's in a different place. And we also learned that she has all of her teeth and maybe the injuries that she thought she had. That she thought were hers are actually Isabel's. According to our narrator at this moment, that's what she thinks. Okay. Remember to pick your watch very carefully, so she's in a different place. And we also learned that she has all of her teeth and maybe the injuries that she thought she had. That she thought were hers are actually Isabel's. According to our narrator at this moment, that's what she thinks. Okay, I'm no longer the PICU, and those injuries that they were talking about, all those bad things, they're not mine. I have my teeth. I must not have all those lacerations and contusions and things. That must have been Isabel they were referring to. And then what reason does Giselle give that Isabel must also be alive? Let's see. The very bottom of the page on page 41, she kind of talks about the things I do remember is what's keeping me on the surface, happy or sad. These memories are mine. They're what I want to go back to when I'm well again. If I'm ever truly well again, this must also be true for Isabel. How could it not be? Our lives began with one cell. So again, we're kind of talking about that being merged, right, as one unit. We're almost the same person. So if I'm alive, she must be too. So that's kind of answering that question. She says that because our lives began with one cell, we are almost the same person. So that's on the bottom of page 41. I feel like that's a pretty important line, so I'm going to go ahead and write it. Our lives, put my quotation marks, began with one cell. So the began as one. We are almost the same person. So if I'm alive, don't mind my dog growling. She's trying. Well, Daisy, no. She's trying to protect me. She must be too. Quotation mark. Normally you would put actually the page number after. It would go like this, and your period after. So I feel like that quote's pretty important, so I'd like for you to write that down. Our lives began with one cell, one unit. We are almost the same person, kind of playing with that idea of being merged. So if I'm alive, she must be too. So if you turn the page, then we kind of learn about this male nurse that comes in. What does the nurse call the narrator? He nudges a person, he's nudging her, and he says his sister's name. He calls me by my sister's name. Try to keep those eyes open. So I find it interesting. As a reader, I'm wondering a couple of things here. Is she really Isabel? Or did she leave her body? Like she was herself in the PICU, and now she's Isabel and she's kind of looking over her body? Or was she all along? Or did they have it wrong? Do they have their identities mixed up because they were so much alike? So many questions are in my mind as I read that. So that was kind of important to note. Question 14, the narrator is unable to speak. Again, that trapped feeling. And she wants to ask the nurse all these questions. She doesn't understand. Why are you calling me Isabel? Where am I? Where is she? Who are we alive? Who's alive? Who's not? How does that make her feel? So I want you to write that down. How do you think that makes her feel that she's unable to speak? And then what do you think? Another question you're going to answer. Is the narrator Isabel? I kind of just referenced this, but is the narrator Isabel and she's confused on who she is, on her own identity? Or is the nurse wrong? Did they have her identity mixed up? Did they have the girls switched? Or is she having an out-of-body experience and is feeling what Isabel feels? I feel like it could be one of those three things. Or if you have a whole nother idea, write it down. But that's definitely a question I want you to think about and write what you think. And then finally, there's a metaphor. In the very ending of the chapter, the author leaves us with a metaphor, and it says, I want my body to be a life raft back to my family and back to my sister, the real Isabel, who may be somewhere out there, wounded, weary, confused, just like I am. So she's still kind of like talking about just like this whole thing being like this, water that she can't just quite swim to the surface of. She just can't quite get to the end, the end, the light of the tunnel. And she wants her body to be that raft back to her family. And it's a metaphor, not a simile. She doesn't say like or as. She literally says my body to be a life raft. So explain that metaphor. That's the last question. So hopefully that helped you answer these questions and gave you a good idea of the things that I found important in the chapter and helped maybe you think a little bit critically about what's happening, what could be happening, and all of the unknowns. And that's all. And I'll see you guys on Monday. Thank you.